Peter.
Thomas, how are you, sir?
Living the dream, baby. Living the dream. We're living the dream. So getting ready for Thanksgiving. How's everything going? You good tonight? We're got a great guest. We'll introduce Ron in a second. But everything going good with you?
Everything's good, man. Life is good. Thanksgiving's coming. My daughter was supposed to make reservations at a restaurant, but she forgot. So we're doing a Fogo de Chao Thanksgiving. So I will have the meat sweats by this time on Thursday, guaranteed. And then the next day, my wife and I are going on a nice cruise.
Bro, I am going to, off pocket, maybe even on air, I'm going to break your shoes on that one. I'm going to break balls on that one. Yeah. So, all right. Well, listen, everything's good. We're going to get into some stuff, some current events, things going on in public safety and law enforcement. But tonight I want to introduce Ron Brooks, a really good friend who I know about, about 13 years now. We met through Chris Moore, which is a partner in Ron's current company, his LLC, Brooks Bowden Moore. Ron Brooks is and I wrote it multiple times in the social media. Ron is a giant and a legend in law enforcement. He's going to be very humble. He's going to say he's not. But he has had such a massive influence on public safety in this country over the last 40, 45 years. Sorry to age you there, Ron, but when I think about the things that I know you did in California, we're going to talk about homicide being better than narco, and we're going to debate that. I know you love your narco work. I thought it was dirty, so we'll debate that, and we'll hear Pete's view on it. But moving on from there, moving to other agencies, and then moving to the NCRIC and the HIDTA, and bringing the NCRIC and the HIDTA together in Northern California, and then getting all your work on the Hill and all the politicians that shaped legislation, shaped technology, and defeating bad legislation that is against law enforcement. You are truly, truly an American law enforcement hero. So thanks and welcome to the show, Ron. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here, and I appreciate being invited. I know you've had a lot of incredible guests, and so it's an honor to be here.
Yeah, I think so. And in all honesty, as we're trying to build this footprint for the Finest Unfiltered, which started in New York and is very New York centric, Eric and John and Marlon do a great job on New York City politics, New York City policing, and all things going on, and they're expanding their political reach as well. Ron and Rob do the executive perspective. Sal Greco does his thing. Pete and I, when we were both guests on the show at different times, we have a national presence. We've met and traveled the country in our various roles, and we have so many people that we knew. And so we thought it was, they invited us to run a show, which we're very grateful for. This is a passion project for us. We're having fun, and we're elevating stories of law enforcement and the things that are going on a national level to bring that to the channel. So we're going to do the best we can and talking about current events, current subjects. Not suspects. I'm still chasing. I'm still hunting. But yeah, so that's it. So Pete, I know you've got a chance to meet Ron recently, but I think you guys have a mutual friend, is what I'm being told.
We do. We have several mutual friends, actually. The first time I met Ron was there's a rooftop party that I attended on Police Week. It was a couple of years back. And then, truth be told, I interviewed for a position with Ron's company, but I didn't have the level of experience that he was looking for when it comes to knowing folks on Capitol Hill and that stuff. So I was not selected, but I absolutely appreciate the work that they do and did in the past, and I'm honored to have them here.
Yeah. Well, listen, we got Ron Brooks here, and Ron, look at that picture. What year is the picture for your intro, episode 22 on the 10-4 Tavern? What year would you say that is?
I think that's about 82, because I was only out in uniform as a sergeant for about a year, and I think, and that's when I was I'd come out of narcotics and then detectives, and then went out as a sergeant before they decided I wasn't housebroken enough to be in uniform to let me back.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to chat GPT that picture and see if I can get an ID on that Diet Pepsi can right there. And the question is what's really in the can? That's the real question. Well, listen, it is the 10-4 Tavern. So, Pete, what are you drinking tonight? And what are we all bellying up to the bar with?
A little Espelon tequila.
Yeah. And Ron, what's this? What kind of whiskey you got?
It's a Japanese whiskey. It's really expensive. I had to Google it. A friend of mine gave it to me. It's got almost a little bit of like Scotch a little smoky, but it's really good.
All right. Well, good. We'll enjoy it tonight. Thank you. I appreciate that you think the 10-4 Tavern is a good occasion to bring the, is it Hibiki or Hibiki?
I don't know how they pronounce it. It's a Suntory whiskey is the
okay.
corporate, but it's like their high end, one of their high end brand. I'm usually an Irish whiskey drinker, but I figured I'd try to class this joint up a little bit tonight.
Yeah, we need that. And I made a game time decision. I wasn't sure when I set the slide up, but because Pete continuously brings tequila because that's his drink of choice, and he'll tell you a story about how healthy it is for you and everything, which I don't dispute. But I'm bringing a mezcal. I forget the brand. I iced up a mezcal shot, so I'm going to do mezcal tonight. But I don't remember which one I have. So welcome to the tavern, everybody. I really appreciate everyone coming in. We have 71 people live already signed in. It's a good start. Only 5-6 minutes in. Got a bunch of comments in the comment section. We'll start bringing those up. But let's, Pete, I'm going to leave it to you and Ron to start talking about, Ron, all the work you do, the advocacy for law enforcement and public safety in the country. Just start wherever you feel necessary on what needs to be done to bring the advocacy for law enforcement that we talked about in the green room starting tonight.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I could step back for just a second. So my career was interesting because I was a working cop, a working narc. I wasn't a politician. I wasn't involved in that stuff. And then I got involved in the California Narcotic Officers Association, and I got on the board over 40 years ago there. And it's a statewide association, but it's a big association, 7,000 members. And I started getting really involved in this whole movement to legalize drugs. We opposed that. I worked around the country on that. That got me to Washington, D.C. a lot. Then I kind of got involved in we were slammed with meth labs in California, got involved with trying to get federal legislation to control precursors. And all of that work made me realize how important it was for cops. Nobody could tell our story like us. And so I'm not talking about kind of the, getting involved in political campaigns or endorsing candidates, but I'm talking about talking to your city council, your state legislature, the Congress, using official channels like through the IACP or your state police chiefs association, your state narcotics association, but also your informal channels. Most cops are really respected in their community. So, whether you're at church or at the PTA or at a softball game or your kid's football game, talking about what what we do in law enforcement is important. Why maybe if you believe this, that drug legalization is a bad idea. Why, if you believe it, that it's a good idea to use technology like ALPR or crime cameras or a drone as a first responder to protect your community. Why that's not a civil rights violation. So I think, even though I remained as a working cop 38 years in various levels, I've worked a lot of advocacy. I've worked the Hill a lot. I've worked my own state legislature a lot.
Yep. Yeah. Well, we certainly took the tour around the DC Hill on LPR and a little bit on facial recognition, and then circumstances moved us away from each other. Obviously, we've remained in contact since 2020. But yeah, all the advocacy for all of those technologies and the common squawking and chirping from the privacy folks, which I'm not against. I'm not against having privacy. But what I saw was the privacy advocates were telling untruths or even going as far as lying by direct lies or lies of omission of what this technology is and is not. So what do you think about that? Like, did you see the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, so I at one point I was asked by the right after 9/11, a federal advisory committee was started that answered to the Attorney General of the United States. I was asked to be on that committee. I ended up chairing it at one point. We got involved a lot in the creation of the fusion centers. That led to the creation of real-time crime centers, and that led to the use of a lot of technology, whether it was, neighborhood crime cameras or LPR or now drones. And we got hammered by that all the time about that it was a violation of people's civil rights and civil liberties. It's not. There's all kinds of court cases on that. You're in a public place, no expectation of privacy. I'll give you one great example. I happen to be in New York for work, and I was heading back to DC. I'm on the Acela, and I get a phone call, and it's a reporter from a major newspaper in New York City, the major newspaper in New York City. And she started asking me about the work that we had done on my committee on supporting this kind of technology. And so I explained, why I thought it was valid technology. She said, why she opposed it. I said, well, ma'am, are you a mother? She goes, yeah, I've got kids. I go, so if you're in a park and you turn your back for a second and your kid is kidnapped, and you call the cops, or maybe the kid's just missing, you're trying to figure out where the kid went, and there's a crime, some community anti-crime camera there, wouldn't you want to use that technology? And she goes, no, because it would violate somebody's civil rights. And I said, ma'am, if you answered that question like that, then you must be lying to me, because you're not really a mom. Moms would never think like that.
Right. Yeah. I've actually had someone tell me the same thing. Go ahead, Pete.
No, look, I think we're in a time where technology is important and it's advancing. We got to be careful. Again, we respect privacy to some degree. You got to be careful that we control the technology, that we have the proper guardrails to make sure people are using it the right way. But, I've gotten on my soapbox about this too. A perfect example would be ShotSpotter in Chicago. Unfortunately, I think we're at a time where when technology works, and unfortunately, one of the byproducts of that good work is that some people wind up going to jail. And I don't mean innocent people. I mean people who deserve to be in jail. There's a small faction of our society that will rise up and demonize that technology. I've told Ralph Clark several times that, when people speak out about ShotSpotter, the people who are speaking out, he should wear it as a badge of honor, because a lot of people don't realize, and I get it. There's a lot of people, who've chimed in before when we've mentioned ShotSpotter here that don't necessarily agree, but it's not used perfectly in every city. But if you're laying there bleeding and you live in a neighborhood where people like Kitty Genovese era don't call the police because they hear gunshots all the time, so the cops aren't coming, but for that ShotSpotter notification, you'll appreciate ShotSpotter. So it's unfortunate when people don't do all their homework before they chime in on law enforcement technology. And again, look, I am a firm believer in having the proper guardrails and safeguards in place, but this thing about technology being racist or whatever, that's just not true.
Yeah.
That story is so valid. So this guy I know, who's the most decorated police captain, police officer of any rank at the Oakland, California Police Department, and he's now retired. And he was getting gas middle of the day. These guys tried to carjack him. He was armed, but he said, "Hey, I'll just let them take my car. It's fine." Except then he hears one of them say, "Hey, let's kill this guy anyway." So he pulls his gun. They get a big gunfight. He's shot 14 times. Wow. Nobody calls the cops. Nobody. Luckily, there's a ShotSpotter activation. Oakland police roll up. They recognize him. They don't wait for an ambulance. They load him in the car. They take him to the hospital. As luck would have it, the head of the emergency department was there. He happened to be this guy's workout partner at the gym. Wow. He rallied the troops. He died on the table, I think, 2 or 3 times. Wow. But he's back, and he's strong, and he's healthy now. He's recovered from this. But had it not been for that ShotSpotter activation, he would have died. The doctor said 2 more minutes, 3 more minutes. That would have made the difference. It would have been over. Yeah. The thing that I'm proud of in the committee that I chaired, the Criminal Intelligence Coordinating Council, which was, like I said, it was chartered under the Federal Advisory Commission Act, FACA, is that we were on a war footing. It was after 9/11. There was a lot of people really reacting. When we sat down, we said, "Hey, look, we still have to build guardrails. We have to build guidelines. If we're not trusted, if we're not trusted in the community, then we can't serve the community." And so we made sure that at least 50% of the work we did was building those federal guardrails on how we use intelligence reports, how we store information, how we vet it, how we use technology. All of that was built into there. I think when you look at law enforcement, good cops want to police themselves. They want good policy because we all know. I mean, you know, this always stuck with me when I went to the academy 100 years ago, when they quoted Sir Robert Peel, the father of modern policing. He said, "Hey, the police are the community, the community's the police."
Community's the police. Yep.
If you don't have, if the community doesn't give you the authority to work, if they don't trust you, you can't do your job.
Yep.
Well, that's right.
Listen,
I started my career as a housing cop, like we mentioned earlier, before we went on camera. And you walked the beat, and you knew who lived in which building, and you knew which kid belonged to which parent, and you knew who the bad people were, and some of the people maybe were a little shady, but not necessarily bad, and you knew who the good people were. You built that trust. It kind of bothers me that so many police departments have gotten away from community policing, because I think when you have that sort of relationship with the community, just echoing what you just said, Ron, and then you have these other things that you bring in, like this technology. You know, you can't abandon that trusted method that you did in the past and pivot only towards technology or only towards intel-led policing. You have to put them all together. And It bothers me when I see some departments, instead of retaining the stuff that worked, they just jump ship. I call it flavor of the day policing. Whatever's the hot topic today, they want to go all in on. And sometimes they forget about the stuff that's tried and tested and worked over the years. Look, if you would ask me in the 35 years I spent in law enforcement, which job I would go back to in a heartbeat, it'd be walking the beat in the projects. I swear to God, I actually enjoyed every minute.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I think Ron is going to tell us about his days of narco enforcement in California, and we're going to debate that again. And folks, we are going to get into Ron's career and tell some really good stories and hear some great stories and weigh in. But I'd like to finish up and talk a little bit about this technology play, because I think it's really important, because Ron and I did do work together with his firm, his current firm right now, where we had an LPR company, and there was a very concerted effort of negative legislation, state by state, all across the country. And when you read the first pass at the bill of what they were proposing for LPR, and Ron, please call me a liar if I say anything that's wrong, it was really restrictive. They didn't want to save any historical data. They wanted alerts to last for 5 minutes. And if you didn't get the alert and didn't respond in 5 minutes, that data was deleted, and you couldn't do anything else with it. And it was just really egregious. And you sat there and you read those legislation state by state and go, who is writing this and who's informing them where this came from? And then it was the LPR company that I was with was a Vigilant Solutions at the time, and eventually became a Motorola company. But there was multiple vendors. We all got together. I have to be honest with you, they weren't really in love with partnering up and putting up a Chinese wall and saying we need to defeat this legislation, even though we're competitors. Like we should have been able to separate. So I would have loved to have seen more of some reach, but not for people like Ron Brooks and my company, and then in the facial recognition space, other companies and NIBIN and ShotSpotter and all of these. Like, if you don't have these efforts, the legislation is going to be devastating to public safety. Is that a true statement, Ron? But not for going back and re-educating these people?
No, that's 100% true. And this goes back to my original statement. Nobody can tell our story, our law enforcement story, like we can. And Tommy, you'll remember that we kept a file of every good news story and the bad news stories around LPR. We didn't try to cover anything, but the good news stories dramatically outweighed any potential abuses. And we were able to tell those stories, and we still, at my firm, we still gather those stories today from all over the country to help tell the stories of NIBIN, of technology like rapid DNA, of technology like digital evidence, phone extractions, LPR, drone as a first responder, all of those things that are, and why asset forfeiture is good. why legalizing drugs is not good. It's about telling the story, but telling it with integrity. Not trying to color the story, just tell the truth the way it is, but telling it with the credibility that you have from being out on the street and seeing this stuff work.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell a story that I think the audience might find hard to believe, but working with you, Ron, and going up to the Hill, senators, congressmen, congresswomen, Democrats and Republicans, of all the times you brought me up to the Hill to lobby for LPR facial recognition, every single one of them, and if you watch any mainstream media news, you've seen them all. So I'm not going to name the names; it doesn't matter. But they're all the very popular senators, the popular congressmen and women, and I found them to be so engaging and so truly invested in listening. And I felt, Ron, again, without naming names, I felt this is not the same person I hear squawking on TV and saying their talking points on the Republican side and their talking points on the Democrat. Like, they're sitting here and we're just normal conversation, and it's a really good give and take back and forth. And then every single time, Republican or Democrat, whatever committee you brought us to, it was like, thanks for coming. Thanks for the education. We're better informed now. We're eventually found out later, we're striking out some of the lines, some of the legislation or restrictions. And it worked every single time. And I'm sitting, what is going on? Like, who's telling the first story? Because they're not good stories.
That's the problem. I mean, first of all, out of respect for our elected officials, whether they're at your state, at your city, or members of Congress, they're juggling a million issues. They're juggling healthcare and finance and banking and national security, law enforcement, education, and so they only have limited amount of time to learn things, and so they rely on staff, and the staff relies on advocates from out in the community, and a lot of times they hear stuff that just isn't true, and a lot of that untrue stuff wasn't even intentional. Somebody hears a story, they take it as gospel. The next thing you know, they're propagating that story. Here was an abuse by law enforcement. It's not true. And so that's why, I just spoke at the California Narcotic Officers Conference on this very topic. I just taught in the UVA Command College cohort on this topic. It's so important. Look, law enforcement, the nobility of law enforcement is incredible. It is an incredible job. And it's one that I wouldn't have traded. I did 38 years, and now I've supported law enforcement for another 13. I wouldn't have traded this for anything. And we can tell the story. And I always urge people, don't be afraid to tell a story. Don't be afraid to get involved in your associations. Don't be afraid to, if somebody says, hey, would you talk at your kid's school or talk at the Rotary or whatever, get up and tell the stories, but get informed first. You don't want to give bad information out either. Make sure you're informed. Pay attention to what's going on, because an informed story is so powerful. And Tommy, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of times we went up there thinking we were going to get shut down, and we would walk up and we would start talking and tell some of these stories and give some of the arguments, the pro arguments. And we didn't try to hide anything if there was any bad stuff going on. And senior staff and members of Congress appreciated it.
Yeah, they did. I'll even tell one story that that there was actually, so we did, this is a true story too, right? And a true statement is that the very conservative right and the very progressive left found out that they were bedfellows in this anti-privacy or pro-privacy. Right. So it's kind of like it's not one side or the other, right to left. It's a circle, because there are some issues that come back and touch each other on the bottom, and you're sitting there going, wait, how is this very far left and this very far right person in this same, like, agreeing on this privacy issue? And you got to bring it back to what's normal in the middle. And it was actually a Republican committee member that I walked in there and we presented on LPR, and I put a license plate detection up on the screen, and I said, there's not a detective in this country that could put an ass in the seat of that car.
Yep.
It is a picture of a car. We don't know who the driver is. And you know what they said? The Republican committee chair said, I don't care.
Right.
And so I was like, whoa, I thought we're pro law enforcement. Yeah, but you're going too far. It's too invasive. I was like, okay. So I learned a very valuable lesson during those years that I don't take anything for granted. I don't know what's coming. I'm going to, like you said, be prepared, have your arguments, have your facts, tell your story the best you can and leave it where it is. Because I went in there thinking this is going to be easy and it wasn't.
You know what what I tell everybody too is there are no sacred cow programs. So I was a HIDTA director. I'm a big proponent of the HIDTA program. And I was in a meeting, a HIDTA director's meeting during the Bush 43 administration when the deputy drug czar came in. And he says, I have to read you something. We're going to defund this program and you guys are all going to be out of business in 6 months, figure out how to wind it down. And we scrambled and told our story on the Hill. We engaged IPC and national sheriffs in Asia, major cities, major counties, all of them, and told our story. And we won, and we actually got our program plussed up. I can give you dozens of programs that's happened. So if you're sitting there and you think, I'm always going to get my burn jag money, I'm always going to get my cops money, I'm always going to get my HIDTA money, UASI money, State Homeland Security Grant Program money, there are no sacred cows. You got to be telling that story all day, every day. And you got to be prepared to launch if somebody decides it's a good, some budget hawk at White House OMB or on the Hill decides it's a good idea to kill that program, because we've seen that time and again. We just saw it again with the HIDTA program. We just saw it again when there was a discussion to merge ATF that we managed to, bring that discussion back. We saw it when there was a discussion of eliminating intelligence and analysis at DHS, and we were able to bring that discussion back. A lot of these people, well-meaning, they're not trying to. They just don't. They hear the wrong side of the story.
Yeah. So Pete, yeah, you're right. And so Pete, why don't you bring up the point that Ron just talked about with the consolidation of ATF and what was going on there? And then there was a presidential nomination this week. So why don't we get to that?
Good one.
Yeah. No, look, I was following that as well. I still have some connections to ATF. And then one of our previous guests, Derek Waltz, was in the administration during that time when it first surfaced. Derek's a great guy, great friend. There was a movement from within inside the administration to consolidate. Look, there were people from within the Republican Party that wanted to get rid of ATF. Burlinson, Marjorie Taylor Greene were the two loudest voices there. I think those people were ignorant to some of the work that ATF actually does. They think that ATF's role is exclusively going after the industry, and they only hear the bad stories. They don't hear the good stories that ATF does. But because of a lot of recent successes with some significant investigations, and because they've learned about the interdictions of stuff going down to the border, primarily firearms, that stuff that doesn't get communicated publicly, they started to back off. But originally the plan was first they would get rid of ATF. Then the second iteration was let's consolidate ATF and DEA. And they weren't going to fold ATF into DEA. They were going to create an entirely different agency. But again, because of, this is from what I'm hearing from pretty reliable sources, because ATF has showed what they're made of in some of these violent crime investigations, in some of these arson investigations. The burning Teslas, FBI was lead investigators on some of those cases. A lot of those cases were solved by ATF agents. A lot of folks forget ATF's jurisdiction is also arson. So they've backed off of that. And ATF is pretty well situated. And look, one of the people that was sitting there to do the assessment is the current Army Secretary, Driscoll, who also is the acting ATF director, who got a first row seat into some of the stuff ATF does. And he's reported back very impressed with some of the work that's happening. And my understanding is he said that on an agent-to-agent basis, he can hold an ATF agent up to any other organization without any reservation. So the beauty of that is the deputy director of ATF, I saw somebody mention PSA 5 in the chat, so someone might recognize this name. Bob Cicada was nominated to be the ATF director. Bob Cicada was a housing cop that later merged into the NYPD, was in street crime, worked for Louis Savelli, in a citywide anti-gang enforcement unit, left NYPD, eventually went to a police department in Florida, then ATF, rose through the ranks, and like I said, currently is the nominee. Hopefully will get confirmed by the Senate to run the organization. I'll tell you this, ATF will have never had a director, and I respect a lot of our former directors, not all, but a lot of them, they'll never have had a director who is as operationally solid as Bob Cicada. The guy was a legendary case maker. He was a legend in Cage Unit. Just phenomenal guy. He's a leader. He's not afraid to make decisions. He's very thoughtful, and I couldn't be prouder. But he's a former PSA 5 guy. I saw PSA 5 in the chat. That's where he worked in housing. So keeping my fingers crossed, because I know that the Senate confirmation process can be a bear. Forgive me for saying this, gentlemen. I'm Catholic. Even if you're Jesus Christ, you will get out like a soccer ball at that Senate confirmation hearing, especially for ATF because of the political nature of some of the laws that they enforce. But great day for that organization. I would say a great day for law enforcement more broadly, because he's a genuine, he's a cop's cop, and he's a great human being. Ron, you know him.
Yeah, and Pete, I couldn't agree more. He is a cop's cop like you. I've been close with a number of ATF directors, but Rob he's approachable. He's a leader. He's a cop's cop. I think we've got a 1-2 punch having Terry Cole and Dan Salter down at DEA. Terry is the administrator and Dan is the deputy administrator. Dan's a really close friend of mine. But Terry Cole is also a great leader, great cop, came up at DEA, went to the state of Virginia as the public safety commissioner under Governor Youngkin, and then came back. We've got great leadership in both of those agencies. And I just had a chance at ICP to sit down with the new director at Secret Service, another very impressive leader. So I think the White House is making the right picks, and I'm proud to know all of them.
Speaking of the Secret Service leader, here's a little inside baseball. I know one of our future guests, Tom, is the CEO of Henry Repeating Arms. Yes. And I had the honor of transporting some custom-made Henry rifles down to South Florida so that they could be presented to the Secret Service agents who saved the president's life in Butler, and that included the current director of the Secret Service. Yep. Works of art, beautiful rifles. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me just say that to the listeners, we have 206 listeners inside of an hour, so that's pretty good. We'll usually peak out around 400, 450 by the end. And what I track is drop-offs. As long as it keeps climbing, we're in good shape. And people will come back and watch it on review. And then what I've come to learn, I thought I try to put a lot of work in, and Ron Layson got on the phone with me today, and we got into the studio and practice. So thank you, Ron, for helping me out. A little production value. I'm not the best at production. And what I come to find out is most people just actually listen, even though we've got the screen and we pull up some pictures and stuff. They put on their podcast, they walk, they talk, listen. They exercise, they do it while they're driving, so they're not really watching as much as we can. But we like to do that for the folks who can watch. I, too, myself find myself listening to the other shows as well because I have to do them in small chunks. I don't have 2 hours at 1 o'clock to listen to Sal on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so I have to chunk them out. And Ron and Rob go at 5 o'clock. I'm having dinner with the kids, so I'm watching like couple of minutes right before dinner, and then I have to pick it up later, and I get it up the next morning and stuff. But anyway, thanks. We really appreciate the viewers and listeners for sure. But that being said, we're definitely going to get into Ron's career a little bit. I'm really, really loving this current events stuff that's happening right now conversation. I'm flying a color of the Metropolitan Police Harbor Unit in DC. We did a visit to the harbor launch in DC this weekend, brought the kids down. He got to take pictures. I'm actually going to pull a picture up if you guys will humor me because I am proud of this. So check out my 12-year-old little guy he's actually supporting Detroit police. I went to the Above and Beyond on Friday. Before that, the week before that, the Above and Beyond Awards in the Detroit Police Departments. That was at Ford Field. So he went to DC Metro, got a little tour of the harbor launch with Astasia Myler, who's my son's former partner, who went to harbor a year ago. She's a harbor and scuba certified cop, third female in the history of the department to do that. I don't know if women cops love to hear the term. Ron, you have a daughter that's a cop. Pete, you do. Do they like badass? Because she's badass. And I'm just going to say that they don't.
All cops want to be badasses.
That's true. I know some guys that are not badass either. So there's that, right? She never wrote a little boating experience, no scuba experience. And a year later, she was on the airline that crashed in the Potomac in January. That was her first assignment, and she recovered many of the 63 bodies. And she drove that boat like nobody's business, and she dug in, and she is rocking it. And she told stories to my son about rescues and all that kind of stuff, and all the kind of enforcement that's on the water. It was a great experience. So shout out to the Metro DC Police Department and Myler. You just call her Myler. It's her last name. It's so funny. No one even knows her first name. It's just Myler, and she was my son's partner for 5 years in District 5 for any DC Metro cops. 5D, they call it 5D. So thanks to that shout out. If you guys want any more final thoughts on current stuff, current trends, things that are happening in law enforcement before we dig into Ron's career?
Just that we've seen law enforcement under intense scrutiny and really under the gun for a long time, and it kind of ebbs and flows. It got especially bad during George Floyd, but there's a lot of people just don't understand the importance of law enforcement. I mean, law enforcement is the single most visible form of state or local government. When people see it, when people have trouble, they call 911, and when 911 needs to dispatch somebody, it's usually the cops. Mm-hmm. When people see the face of their local or state government out on the street, it's usually in the form of a uniformed police officer in a marked car. And so it's not just the technology stuff we're talking about. It is the importance to tell the story of what a tough job this is, what an important job this is, why it's so important to get Tommy, you and I talked about it off camera before, to have the best qualified, the best trained. The responsibilities of a police officer are incredible. The pressure to make split-second life and death decisions is incredible. And so I think that we ought to always, and that's why I appreciate both of you on this podcast, we ought to always be talking about the importance, the nobility, the greatness of America's 800,000 cops.
Yeah, for sure. So to that point, Ron, you say the most important, and it's the first line of government. Like, for me, having watched the neighborhood that I'm most familiar with in New York City, Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, for anyone who doesn't know, was a very violent area. There was a little bit of affluence in the African-American community, some judges, some lawyers and prosecutors and business folks, but also just a lot of violence. And there wasn't one chain restaurant, wasn't one chain business. Everything was small mom and pop stores. Everything was expensive because of the margins in these kinds of stores that have to serve this community, grocery stores and bodegas and such. And you couldn't get a cup of coffee in a Dunkin' Donuts or a Starbucks. And then the Giuliani regime came in and said, no, we can curb crime and we can bring it to, and Jack Maple's goal was always, as it should be, a very, very aspirational goal of zero crime. That is the goal, zero. Now, we all know you're never going to get to zero, but that's what you're shooting for. I get that. And we, over a 27-year period, not only in New York City, but nationwide, watch it. And so what I'm saying in a very micro level in Bed-Stuy is I watched that neighborhood change. And I walked into my precinct commander's office and he told me, an Applebee's is coming and they're putting a store on Fulton Street. I was like, no effing way. No way. And they're like, no, they're investing in this neighborhood. No way. And that was the very first one. And I was like, I cannot believe it. And then there was a Dunkin' Donuts, and then there was all of these stores, and then there was all of these like cool foodie and craft cocktail places. And 10 years later, I didn't even recognize this neighborhood. Ron, how did we let this go? How once you've got it and you've gained that ground, how do you give any of it up? How do you give up 1 inch of it? Like,
yeah, well,
and because safety is the economic driver.
Sure. It's funny. I was in DC. This is when I was still in the government, but I was, involved in a bunch of committees, and I had a meeting canceled. And so I went into Draper Cigars when you could still smoke in the cigar shop. And I'm sitting in this easy chair and I'm smoking a cigar. And this guy plops down next to me and goes, or he says, "Hey, can I sit in the chair next to you?" I said, "Sure." I don't look up. And then he goes, "What are you smoking?" I told him. I said, "What are you smoking?" He tells me. And then I turn and look, and it's Giuliani. And I said, "Hey, Mr. Mayor, I just testified in Congress yesterday on the dramatic improvement in safety in America, and I cited the work of your policies and the NYPD." And he goes, "No, you didn't." I said, "I did." I said, "Here." I pulled out my printed testimony. I go, "Here you go." And he goes, "Yeah, you did." That's something that Tommy, you know these numbers better than me, but 93 city of New York was 2,300 and something murders.
Yeah,
And now it's sub 400. That's a lot of lives saved. But we could have been down even lower than that if we hadn't turned our back on sound policy. I'm not talking about, Gestapo techniques. I'm not talking about the cops not being part of the community, but people have to be held accountable. And if there's no accountability, if you don't have cash bail, if you don't prosecute people and make them pay for violent crime, I'm not talking about drug users that are sick with substance abuse disorder. I'm not talking about people that are homeless and they're just trying to stay alive. But I'm talking about those predators in the community that prey, whether they're out slinging dope as a predator, whether they're committing robberies or sexual assaults, or they're trafficking, human trafficking. People have to pay for that.
Well, look what happens when it doesn't happen. I mean, look what happened just recently on the subway in Chicago.
Yep.
The gentleman had 84 arrests, 8 prior felony convictions. That was unheard of at some point that someone like him would be walking the streets. I agree with you, Ron.
And we had Rob Tufano. We talked about the girl stabbed on the subway in it's not a subway, but the rail in Charlotte, North Carolina. I mean, we can't have these recidivists. My brother-in-law, and I love him to death. And, and for the listeners, I'm a social liberal, fiscal conservative, and right of Genghis Khan on crime, which puts me on an island. But my brother-in-law and I have these really wonderful conversations, and he's a liberal, but he knows what progressive, crazy things are. But he's also a clinical psychologist, and he says that the biggest predictor of behavior is past behavior. Like that's psychology. That is science. I thought we're supposed to follow the science. If you continually commit crimes and you don't rehabilitate this person, all you do is incarcerate them and put them back, they are going to do the same thing over and over and over again. And why are you expecting anything different? What? 84 previous arrests? What? 70 didn't convince you?
Yeah. I mean, I spent so much time in narco. It's a passion for me. I was the president 16 years of the National Narcotic Officers Coalition, past president of the California Narcotic Officers. And I've testified in Congress and state legislatures. I've gone to Europe and talked about it. Where it all starts with weed. When I started as a narco detective, weed was 2% THC, 1%, maybe 3%. Now hybrid smoked weed is 30%. Edibles are 60 or 70%. Butane hash oil is 90%. And we used to think you couldn't get addicted to weed and it couldn't cause things like psychosis. There's a ton of credible studies out of Harvard, out of NYU Med, out of Stanford Med, in the UK. The instance of psychosis now from this high potency weed, the instance of addiction now, but somehow it makes you sound like you're some kind of a right-wing nut job if you say that we ought to deal with this. I'm not talking about locking people up for weed, but I'm talking about having consequences against the dealers and trying to help people that have a problem get into treatment that matters. Because if you look at this problem with homelessness, it's all comorbidity, almost all of it, with drug and alcohol abuse. It drives so much of that. And it's to me, it's inhumane to turn our back and not deal with those problems.
Well, look, I think one of the challenges, and you hear it sometimes on the news, is you hear some folks who are pro-criminal, I don't know how else to describe them, complain that we can't arrest our way out of this. And I agree, you can't arrest everybody. And then one of the talking points that's in line with that is the jails are full of people for marijuana use. I remember in Arizona, for us to charge someone federally with marijuana, it had to be over 800 pounds. Yep. And I know from hundreds and hundreds of arrests in New York City, I mean, nobody went to jail for marijuana. And it usually had to be over an ounce for you to give anything other than a summons. So, I mean, there's a lot of misinformation that's out there about how the criminals are victimized by the system, which is unfortunate. Look, I think we've come to a point in our society, and not everywhere, but in some places where the victim has been marginalized. Yep. And the police discounted entirely and the criminal coddled. And until that mindset goes away, I think there's certain parts of the country they're going to continue to suffer. That's just unfortunate. But I agree with you, Ron, 100%.
Yeah, it's wild. So, all right. I was trying to segue to Ron's career. I want to hear some really great stories on running around in the narco land of California, but you brought back some current events. So, you guys ready to transition? Ron, you good?
I'm good.
All right. So, where'd you grow? But I'm sorry, say again.
I can talk about that other stuff forever. Something that I'm
passionate about. Yeah. We can get back.
And Pete, you're right. If you look, they were hammering us on this stuff about all these people were locked up. They were in prison. We looked at the National Institute of Justice had some study. The National Institute of Justice Statistics has some statistics. People locked up in prison for weed was like 1.3% of the prison population, and they were there for even if their charge said possession, they were there for sales or possession with intent to sell, and it got plea bargained down.
Right.
Nobody. I mean, you guys, even back when we started as young coppers, nobody's going to jail for possession of weed.
No. And speaking of all this weed, I hope that when you're talking to us about your experience in California as a narc, that you did some time or have some familiarity with Humboldt, because I've always been intrigued by that part in California. I want to hear about Humboldt if you have any stories about Humboldt.
No, I want to hear about Murder Mountain.
Yeah. Well,
right. All right. Oh, so yeah. All right. Well, we'll dig into that. We'll figure that out.
Although I could make it up if you need me to.
Yeah. Well, you have poetic license, so Ron, it's your story tonight. So, all right. So let's do this. Ron, where did you grow up, and how did you grow up? Like, what was going on in your world, and then how did it lead you into a career of law enforcement?
Yeah. So I grew up in San Jose. When San Jose, before it was the heart of Silicon Valley, San Jose was mostly agriculture. It was orchards, it was farms. It was not a little city. It was about 250 or 300,000. But now San Jose is over 1 million. The metro area is 3 million. The San Francisco Bay Area is 11 million. So it was a much different deal. My dad was a California Highway Patrol officer, and I wanted to be a high school history teacher. That was my big goal for a long time. And then I wasn't as good a student as I should have been, and I needed a gig. My dad said, well, you could always take some law enforcement tests and try to get on, and then you could work nights, go to school in the daytime, finish up, and you could teach college or teach high school, whatever you want to do. I said, that's a great idea. So I got hired at LAPD, and then they had a lawsuit on the height requirement and an injunction. And so I had an academy date that canceled. Got hired at San Jose, had an academy date, same kind of a lawsuit that canceled. Same with Fremont PD. And so I ended up in a little way up Northern California as a cop. And I went out on my first day, and I said, "There's no way I'll ever be a teacher. This thing is just way too much fun." I couldn't believe it. And it wasn't even like a busy city or anything, but we were out there, we were doing police work, and but I was dating my wife, who's a San Jose cop, and I wanted to get back home, and so I came back to the Bay Area. Things were still kind of tied up, so I ended up on the San Francisco Peninsula near Stanford College, at a place called Redwood City, which was not Redwood because it had redwood trees. It only had one redwood tree in the City Hall parking lot. It was because there had been a port, deepwater port there, and they had shipped redwood trees out of there. It was actually a pretty tough town at the time. And I worked patrol. I worked a felony car for a while. That was really fun. And I ended up being asked to go in. We had, even though we were in a huge department, 120 folks or something, we had a 5-person sergeant and 4 detectives working narcotics, and our chief was very supportive of that. And that was kind of how I got into the narco world to start with.
That's awesome.
I was working that job. I worked for this great guy, George Garrett, who was a legend. I worked with some other detectives, Dale Switzer, Bob Thiel, Don Kerr, Dave Tresmonton. And in 81, we were Dale Switzer and George Garrett and I just finished an undercover buy, and George Garrett said, "Hey, it's payday, and I'm buying you guys lunch because you've been doing a good job." And so we were kind of huddled up, deciding where we were going to go to lunch, and we heard a bank robbery in progress. And George voted to go to the bank. I voted to go to lunch, but I lost the vote. And because he was a sergeant, we went to the bank, and in a couple of minutes, we were in a gunfight. George was killed. Bob Peel, this other detective, was wounded. And then we killed the suspect. And I was about 26 years old, and it was a tough way to grow up in the business. But what it did teach me is it made me really focus on wanting to be a great cop in his memory. But it also made me realize that we were out doing very serious work. Before that, I kind of thought it was all fun and games. It is fun and games sometimes.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize what that was all about until then.
So I want to say something, Ron. I'm sorry, I did not know that. And I think for our audience, which is heavily weighted in law enforcement, active and retired, and then supporters of law enforcement, certainly. And then I'm sure there's some people out there that are just on the periphery. But Ron and I know each other 12 years. I never heard that story. And so we don't always share all of those stories. I don't know everything about Ron Brooks. One of the reasons why he was invited to the podcast tonight, Pete and I, we talk once a week for the last 7 or 8 years. I don't know everything about Pete's story either. And so we keep those things tight. Sometimes we share them, sometimes we don't. These are the things. Ron, you just said something that it's a fast and tough way to grow up at 26 years of age. You're darn right it is. So God bless you. Thank you. And God bless the memory of your
it was a tough time. We were getting ready for George's funeral. I was going to meet a guy for lunch. We heard this call of shots fired. I said, I'm not going to that because I already had some bad luck going on. And then I felt guilty. And so I answered up and I said, hey, I'll stop by this. But, I had long hair. I was in civvies. And I said, so please don't anybody shoot me by accident. And so I get out and I see this guy who's a law enforcement officer that I recognized in civilian clothes. He's got his gun in his hand. And I thought, oh, he must live here. He must have self-deployed on this shooting. And he turned around and he started shooting at me. I thought, this is, I couldn't figure out, it made no sense to me. Well, it turned out the shooting was he was trying to kill his girlfriend. And then when he saw me, he didn't want me interfering with it. And then a week after we had the funeral for Sergeant Garrett, we were doing an entry on a group of Jamaican dope dealers, and we got another shooting. So within about 30 days, 3 shootings.
That's a lot. I mean, that's a lot for a career.
It's a lot for a career. It was really a lot. And this is you guys will both remember this. You're of the age that, they just kind of patted you on the head, and there was no counseling, there was no like service.
Yeah. Just get back out there.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm passionate, so I've done a lot of volunteer work for the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. I'm on the board of trustees of a fund in California that pays an immediate death benefit to every cop killed within 24 hours. We get the financial benefit out to them. And George, God bless him, his wife was pregnant. His daughter, Nicole, was born, I think, about 12 days or 13 days after he was killed. She's now married to a police officer, an HSI agent. She's a great young lady. And but that made me really focus on why it's important to help cops work safe and why it's important to take care of cops from a wellness perspective, to do a better job in the way we do our outreach, because for all the cops that are killed every year, we lose another 3 times that to their own hand, and then we lose even more just to the health hazards of being stressed and dealing with PTSD, and people that lose their family, or they get a substance abuse problem, an alcohol problem or something. So that is another passion of mine, is taking care of other cops.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
I mean, well, Pete, I'm going to let you weigh in on this one, Pete. This is all you, baby.
Yeah, Ron, after 9/11, I lost 7 good friends on that. And I lost people.
Oh, my God.
That. Yeah, but so I went into this really dark place where I couldn't attend their funeral. I couldn't go. I felt guilty. I was there when the South Tower fell. I was there right after the first plane hit, actually. And I felt guilty for being alive, And then around 2006 or so, started to get some physical manifestations. And that's why I went out to Phoenix. I figured I could run away from it,
Right.
It wasn't until many, many years later, after I had lung cancer from 9/11, that I was in the hospital, and I realized, hey, wait a minute, I came into this profession whole. I want to leave whole. Granted, I was down and long. I wasn't leaving whole. I want to leave as whole as possible. And that's the first time that I actually asked for help, because, like you just brought up, I was raised during a time where you shut up. You don't ask for help. We're the police. We're the people that people ask for help. We never ask for help.
Right.
So I didn't. It was embarrassing. It was shameful to do so, I thought. Right. So anyway, there were years where I sat there on the couch in my own head thinking about things. I never thought about eating my gun or anything. But, the wife would call me 2 or 3 times before I'd snap out of it and answer. And I'd be sitting there watching television, but not really watching television. I was going through stuff in my own head, remembering things, thinking about the job sometimes. And not even the bad things. You're just so caught up in the work that I never asked for help till 2018. So for 12 years, I was in this dark place. And then finally said, hey, man, fuck it, I'm going to ask somebody for help. Found a guy that's really into meditation, former doctor, who now takes what he learned as a doctor and incorporates that into meditation and whatnot. The doctor, when I had the cancer, I've been cancer-free since 2018. He said to me, before they even knew whether or not it spread, he was more concerned with me dying of high blood pressure than cancer. Got the blood pressure down through the meditation, didn't even have to take pills. But I think it's so important for people to talk, like you just did, about what we've been through, so that people who are sitting there that are on the fence, even if we change one person's mind and pick up the phone and call a priest or call a counselor or speak to a doctor or speak to a friend, is so freaking important. So I'm glad you brought it up unsolicitedly. But yeah, it's a passion project of mine too. I always say it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to do nothing about it.
I just I saw this great presentation at Major City Chiefs this year by this, I can't remember his name, but he's a retired assistant chief at Dallas, and he had experienced some significant trauma in his career. And a guy had reached out to him. This wasn't a buddy of his, some crusty old cop, and said, hey, look, kid, that call yesterday is a tough call. Let's talk about it. And so fast forward, now he's the number 2 or number 3 in the agency. And he starts a program called the check-in or check something program, where 48 hours after they flag all these calls where somebody, it's a drowning, a SIDS death, a homicide, a car crash, whatever. And it's not a counselor. It's just a respected influencer in the department, working cop or sergeant, to say, hey, look, bro, that was a tough call. there's no shame in going to see the counselors on this,
right,
and just staying in touch. And it has turned around their alcohol and use of force that they had related to those kind of trauma calls. I'd like to learn more about that program. It sounded like an incredible program.
Well, I know you deal with ATF quite a bit. They have a peer support program, and there's similar things that's been very successful. So,
yeah.
So I think a common theme has been in our episodes, and we're up to, this is 22 for us. A lot of our guests are, some more than others, but very cognizant of the officer wellness situation. And the common theme is all, yeah, it's better, but it's not anywhere near where it should be. Ron, is that right? Do you hear the same thing?
Yeah, I do. I think that we've done a lot better. I mean, I came on the end of 74. It's a long time ago. We weren't good at all then. I think we're way better, but we could do so much more. I tell people, and I truly mean this, I never had a bad day on the job, but I had bad parts of days. Either the day started great, or we did a great case, or we celebrated somebody's birthday at the end of the shift, or we celebrated, we went to the pub and celebrated a great case or whatever. But, obviously when my sergeant was killed, that was that was a bad part of the day, but the day had started out fun.
It's interesting perspective.
And this job can be really hard on you, but it could also be so incredibly rewarding. And I wouldn't have traded it. I mean, and I don't think either of you wouldn't be doing this podcast and connecting with cops if you didn't love this job.
Yeah.
No, every single, like, there were a lot of people that I know that took the job for a job, a job, health benefits, got in, got out, head down. There were those people for sure. However, the ones that went out there, connected with the community, connected with the victims, and put handcuffs on really, really bad people, every single one of them, not one would ever say they would change anything. Now, John and Eric do ask, when they bring back retired members, would you do it again? And would you do it again today? And so I think me, Joey Herbert, and maybe 2 or 3 other people said we would do it again today. Most don't, which is sad. It really breaks my heart. But every single one I wouldn't change a thing. I
would do it again today. It wouldn't be as much fun as I had before, but it's
but you only know what you know, though. You only know what you know.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's a great job. It's an important job. I would do it again today.
Yeah. You know what's encouraging to me, Tommy? We've had some real heavy hitters on this show. I mean, people who, I know the word legend gets thrown out there a lot. It's perhaps cliche, but I mean, we've had people who are like very, very respected in this profession. And of the roughly 20, what episode are we up to?
We're 22 now, 22.
Right. I would say, based on my recollection, at least 15 to 17 of them have self-disclosed that at some point in their career, they struggled. And I think that's actually a great thing, because again, these aren't, shrinking violets. These are heavy-hitting cops who went out there and did the job, had guts, determination, grit, who now have the self-awareness to be, and the humility to be able to say that they struggled. So I think that's chipping away at that block. And if that continues, then you'll see cops proactively seeking help more in the future. Because look, man, this is a great job. And like I said, like you just said, we would do it all over again, but you deserve to leave here whole. You deserve to enjoy your retirement without living in some darkness or being haunted by certain things. But that people are getting help or that are talking about things, I think is encouraging. There was a time where you did not do that, period. It was perceived as a sign of weakness.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, Ron. So talk to us. Let's get back to your career. You sent, so just so everyone knows, Ron sent some great pictures going back, way back. And some of the pictures I would not even recognize that it was Ron. So Ron, I don't know all the stories, so it's harder for me to connect the picture to the story. So why don't I bring up a picture or two, and then so it won't follow chronologically, but sure. Just tell us what the picture is and tell us what was going on with that.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Sure. So I after I left Redwood City PD as an ARC. They were starting a countywide task force. The sheriff asked me to come over. I did that, and then I went to the State Bureau of Narcotic Enforcement. It was the oldest drug enforcement agency in the U.S. Sadly, Kamala Harris, when she was the AG, even though it had been around since 1926, she closed the agency. But at the time, we were a big agency statewide. We ran 60 task forces, or 64 maybe. We had 9 field divisions. And I had been undercover in this case on Monterey Hells Angels. We busted it out. That's my partner, Max Hauser, who sadly just passed away last year. But great copper. And so we were working in our San Jose field division. In that field division, we had from San Francisco down to San Luis Obispo. This was the Monterey chapter that we had targeted. And, it's a great case. I had worked, Pete, I had worked a Hells Angel task force with San Francisco ATF back in the 80s with like Ted Baltus and some, legendary, Zerby, a bunch of legendary ATF guys. And, but they were always fun to work. I had a blast working them. People that talk about, oh, they're out there, the toy drive. They're just, they're just kind of, they're not really that bad. We both, all of us know what a significant criminal organization they are globally, the amount of violence that they use. But, when you bust that stuff out, you got to have a couple of trophy shots. And so that was one of them.
Of course. All right. This was my favorite picture. We talked about it in the green room, so I got to hear this.
Yeah, so that's Mike Preston. He sadly passed away now too.
I'm sorry to hear this, bro.
That we had just finished doing a drug buy in East Palo Alto. Interestingly, in 1992, this little community of East Palo Alto was. This was before '92, but to show you some flavor of this city. It was the per capita murder capital of the United States in '92.
Wow.
15,000 people, 2.2 square miles, and I think they had 47 murders and 150 non-fatal shootings. It's a tough town, to say the least. And so I'd been undercover. He was one of my cover units. We'd kind of all split up. We were heading back to the office, and we drive past this place, which we had hit many times. It was a social club. Which is, code for it was a gambling place. They'd play craps and deal dope. And so we just happened to drive by and we said, holy moly, look at that. So we got a couple of pictures, got one of our other partners to take a picture. Mike Preston was a great copper. And I'll give you one quick story on him. We were up in Daly City, which is near San Francisco. He picked up this suspect. We were actually coming down to East Palo Alto to make a significant buy. And Preston had the great gift of gab. And we could hear on the wire, we hear these guys go, hey, when we get there, we're going to pat you down for a gun and a wire. And if we find either, we're going to blow your brains out. And so Preston goes, well, I don't have a gun, I don't have a wire, nothing to worry about. And so he pulls off the freeway, and there was a liquor store on the way to this house where they were going to go buy dope. And he pulls in and they go, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm thirsty. Aren't you guys thirsty? And they go, no, we're not thirsty. Don't get out of the car. And he goes, I got to get some beer. So he bails out. He takes his gun and his wire off. He says, my gun and wire are behind the Budweiser quart bottles. He goes, I'm going to do this buy. When I tap the brakes 3 times, that's the bus signal. Now, we would never do that today. That's dangerous and stupid. And I'm not advocating for that, but it was pretty inventive police work at the time. And that's the kind of guy he was.
Yeah, he's like Ginger Baker from Cream.
Yeah, he does look a little bit like Ginger Baker. He was also before he went to Narco was the department, one of the department's helicopter pilots. He was a really accomplished fixed wing and helicopter pilot. He was a great patrol cop when he was in uniform, and but he finally had to retire. He had 2 really hard landings in his helicopter, and then one bad crash, and his back finally just couldn't but that was probably circa 1979, 80, something like that.
Wow. That's so good. I love these old photos. All right, let me pull up this one. And then I'm going to go off camera for a second. I'm going to mute. I can listen. Keep telling the stories.
Okay, so this is a great story. That guy on the left is Chris Mackey. He was a narc at Santa Clara PD. This is when I was in the county drug task force. And Chris developed an informant, and he said we could buy a kilo of dope. And nobody had ever bought a kilo of dope. This is probably about 84 or 5. They were getting kilos of dope in LA, but nobody ever bought a kilo of dope in Northern California before. And so we bought this kilo and we rolled that guy over. And he said, "Hey, I know a guy that's sitting on 10 kilos. We said, "That's impossible." But we hit this guy, and he was sitting on 10 kilos. His father was a very senior official in Colombia. And then we rolled him over and kept him on ice for about 3 days, and he was making calls. And he kept calling the Colombian consulate in LA to try to set this buy up, and he was getting nowhere. And finally he says, "Look, I'm needed." I never forget the go-between's name his moniker was Medico. He goes, "I need to speak to Medico." And they said, "Medico's not taking any calls." And he goes, "But it's about the white." And they said, "Oh, about the white. Well, that's a whole different story." So we said, "Well, how much do you think you could buy?" And he says, "I think I could get 10 kilos. We said, "Okay, 10 kilos is good." So we set up this buy bust in the parking lot. We flash the money. He goes, we surveil him. The surveillance team surveils him. They make him into a very small gated community, about 10 houses in an affluent area. And so they come back and we arrest them with the 10 kilos. And I said, "Did you make the door?" And they go, "No, but we made it within about 4 doors." And the guy had a garage door opener. So we took the garage door opener, we drove into this gated community, we started clicking the button until the garage door opened. And then we had a Polaroid of this guy, and we knocked on the next door neighbor, and we showed them the picture, and we said, "Have you seen this person at that house?" And they go, "Yeah." So we kicked the door and froze the house for a warrant. And again, there had never even been 1 kilo seized in California. Now we have, or in Northern California, now we have the original 1 and then the next 10. And we thought, well, maybe we'll get some paperwork, maybe we'll get a little money. That'll be it. And so we wait. I go back, I write the affidavit, I get the search warrant. They're sitting in the house. We start searching the house, and we find this 194 kilos.
Wow.
So
I'll tell you this, Ron. I worked in the Bronx for 22 years. Everything's the Bronx. Oh my God, Bronx, a violent place, and it's violent. Never saw anything even close to a haul like that. Not even half of that. But I do have a question.
This dope. So I can remember just 4 years earlier, LAPD had seized 10 kilos, and Chief Gates did a press conference, and he said, "We have broken the back of drug dealers. We will never seize another kilo in the history of California. This is it." And so at this time, wholesale price, we were paying about $60,000 a kilo. So that, we got one. So it's 194 plus the initial 11. And the picture you see on there, their brand marking was all a photo of Muammar Gaddafi.
I was going to say, who's that? Yeah, the photo. Yeah,
I thought it was going to be Escobar or something.
Colombian. The revolutionary group FARC. We traced it all back to FARC. We got a big federal prosecution. We had another house. We got another 10 kilos from an associated house. We got another maybe $500,000 in cash, I think, from an associated house. But it was a great case.
Yeah.
And when we hit this house, there was only 3 of us. Everybody else had gone to bed. People were disgusted. We'd been up for like 20 hours. And the minute we started getting this dope, I said, if they would kill you for 1 kilo, they'll kill you for a lot of kilos. And we called the local jurisdiction. We said, "You better get over here with some cops with some guns, shotguns or rifles or something to protect us." And but that was a really fun case.
Yeah, wow.
Man. So all of these. So for me, and again, Ron, I never liked narco. I did it for 1 year. It was small stuff. It wasn't anything. Hand to hands in the street. Not a lot of weight at all. I just didn't like it. I just didn't get attracted to it because I always felt that, and again, you hear it all the time. Well, we don't go after, these Wall Street guys who are dealing drugs all the time and sniffing cocaine and all. Well, there's no violence around that. So the bodies, and then I'm watching The Wire right now. For anyone who doesn't know, The Wire is a 5-season series about narcotics and drug trade in Baltimore, and it ties in politics. It drives in the docks. It drives in the schools. Drives in the media. It's all about the bodies.
And it's
right?
It is.
Pete, I want to talk to you about this in the future. Pete, we got to break down some of the stuff in there because some of it is a little far-reaching, but man, a lot of the writing is spot on, and I would love to break it down. So yes, it is, Ron. The Wire, yeah.
I thought The Wire was the most authentic inner-city policing show documenting Northeastern. I guess Baltimore's territory.
Yeah, sure.
Technically not maybe the Northeast. I thought it was spot on. I didn't like that they gave away a little too many of our secrets, frankly. Cameras, I thought it was very, very cool.
So, but Ron, getting back to this, the bodies, that's a lot of weight. There's got to be bodies falling somewhere in this. And today, I grow up. I live around people who are doing marijuana and they're adults and they're in their 50s and they're smoking marijuana. And all I say to them was did you buy that legally or illegally? Well, and I know you're a cop, Tom. And they and I go, well, look, I'm far removed from that, so I'm not judging. However, I just want, you do know somebody died for that, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And they go, what do you mean? They go, what do you mean? And I tell them, I go, in the trafficking of that drug from its origin to you, there's a bunch of dead bodies. You're okay with that? And they don't know what to do. They don't know if they should shit, wind their watch, or go sailing. Right? But so the bodies, Ron, did you guys go that far deep, or as a narco, you were just making the seizures and moving on?
Oh, we did. Oftentimes we did. Although in this case, what we learned from from a source that we flipped in this case, that there were no bodies probably in the U.S., but there were bodies in Colombia. Yeah. And later, we never saw Colombians. Eventually, the Mexican drug trafficking groups, cartel-based groups, they kind of took over. So dope would come out of South America, mostly Colombia, coke would, and it would get to Mexico, and then they would take over the distribution of that. So a lot of my career, we worked at, there was a time in the late 80s through the mid 2000s where DEA said that about 85% of all meth in America came out of big super labs in California. Those were all Mexican drug trafficking group, cartel based, a lot of murders over, turf, over, perceived informants, over debts owed. But the thing that I learned with working dope is these guys were never just dope dealers. They were always involved in all kinds of crime. It was all poly crime, and it was all poly drug. I mean, they just wanted to make money. So if they're making money on coke and they found out they could make more money on fentanyl, or they could make more money, now on fentanyl, or more money on heroin, or they could mix loads. I can remember working some big cases that were coming in commercial vehicles where they would say, okay, we'll sell you 20 pounds of meth, but you got to take 2 pounds of heroin off our hands too, or you can't have the load.
Yes. Yeah. Right. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. All right. Let's see what else we got. So I don't think you have any more of the big good old days kind of transitioning into some more, I don't know. What do we got here?
I think that was my office in San Jose. So when I was a special agent in charge of the San Jose State Narcotics Office, we had, I think I had 7 task forces. This isn't my task forces, but that's just the state agents that worked for me.
Yeah.
And we were just out of a range day, and or maybe we were getting ready to hit. I think that was a range day, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
But it was that was a great outfit. That was actually working the third largest motorcycle rally in the nation is in Hollister. And after the Laughlin, there was a big blowout, Hells Angels and Mongols in Laughlin, big shootout in the casino.
I remember that.
And so they needed some help. And so every year for about 7 years, I would bring down about 30 or 40 guys to work this, what was otherwise a pretty quiet, semi-rural area. And we made a ton of arrests, got a lot of guns, a lot of dope, had a lot of fun.
Is that coastal? Ron, is Hollister on the coast or no?
It's not too far from the coast. It's inland on 101. Like if you're going down to Carmel, so you would kind of veer west to the coast, but it's a little inland. And little police department, a little sheriff's office, no SWAT team even. They were kind of under the gun. So while we didn't normally work in uniform, we did help those guys out because they were just swamped. I would usually. I think that's just guys from my office, but I would usually take about, I would usually bring down 1 or 2 helicopters and 60 folks to work it.
Wow.
Yeah. So I want to bring up a comment here. Michael Lamb, he says Washington Heights, which is on the New York side of the George Washington Bridge, was the hub for cocaine and heroin for the Northeast. So I want to tell you a story, and this is why narco for me wasn't that big of a deal. So I was doing narco in the 77 Brooklyn North Module 7779, and I was a sergeant. Rodney Harrison, retired chief of department in the NYPD, Suffolk Police Commissioner, and Pete met him last week at the National Homicide Investigators Association. He was a detective who worked for me. He actually taught me narco. Anyway, that being said, we were all like small weight, like hand to hands, bullshit nonsense. But yet only 3 miles as a crow flies from Brooklyn to the foot of the George Washington Bridge, where Washington Heights, when Michael M. is bringing this up, was the hub. We had narco sergeants and lieutenants who transferred to the Manhattan North Initiative. And they would call me up and go, Tommy, you're not going to believe this. Remember when we were doing 8 balls and maybe a key on a good day? He goes, I'm getting 5 keys a day, 6 keys a day. It's like, it's so crazy. So it's really geolocation based because of the trafficking routes, right? So is that what you saw, or is anything like that? Because for us,
yeah, I mean, that was
my experience.
It was more organization based, and it just depended on where they happened to where they happen to be focused. And our biggest traffickers were always Mexican cartel based. Even with crack, they would traffic down to African American gangs who would then traffic it out. So that picture where the fire picture in East Palo Alto, I told you the story of the violence there. It was interesting. I was working for state narcotics. The mayor called the AG, that's who we worked for, state AG, and said, I'm getting killed, violence, murder rate is out of control. You got to do something. So I get stuck. Not stuck. I didn't really want to do it. I was trying to work something else, but I got asked to run a task force there and to focus on, my agency didn't do retail drug trafficking cases at the state, but that's what these cases were all about. But to break the back of the violence there, we said, okay, we're going to get everybody on board. So we went and met with the DAs, all the prosecutors with the DA. We met with the judges, and we said, look, you guys got to have maximum penalties. We got to treat this seriously. It's the only way we're going to break the back of this violence, because all the violence was about turf. Mm-hmm. It was all about turf. And so we went in, we made 3 days a week. We would go in and make 10 to 12 buys a day. We could have made 40 buys a day, but we overwhelmed the system. The DAs couldn't, the probation officers doing the pre-sentence reports, they couldn't do it. So we would go in, we'd hammer them. We could get that in about a couple hours. And but we locked so many people up that they went from 47 murders to the next year they had 2 murders because we locked everybody up. And it just shows what happens when you have real consequences. And then but that doesn't stay. So if you take your eye off the ball, if you go back to saying, well, these poor people are suffering and in that same community, little community, this is probably a 30-person police department. They've had 2 cops shot and killed by crack dealers there. Yeah, this is not a big community.
But Tommy, the reason Washington Heights was a hotbed was you had the cocaine would make its way to the Dominican Republic, and they would take it across by boat across the Mona Passage into Puerto Rico from the DR. By this time, the Dominicans were controlled because Washington Heights was Dominican mostly. And then once you got to Puerto Rico, you threw it on airplanes. They're not looking for drugs on planes leaving Puerto Rico. So once it crossed the Mona Passage and made it onto Puerto Rico, they had free reign to get anywhere in the United States. So, but that's why Washington Heights was rife with home invasions and huge stash houses.
Yeah. Well, we had 2 cops killed on the same night in different incidents, on drug-related incidents. Michael Busick and Chris Hoban on the same night, and that was crazy because the Washington Heights was off the hook. And I have a really good friend, John Garrity. Shout out to John. He worked the Heights and talked about the craziness of that place. But did any of those people did those guys wear socks up there, Pete? The Dominicans?
Some of them did, not all.
Because nobody had socks. They all had like pants and
they were sharp people, Tommy, and they could.
Yeah, they are. They are.
They literally, they were. But I tell you what, man, they were quick to pull guns on folks. It was a violent place. They murders, but home invasions. The Bellow case alone was 145 robberies. Roughly 20 guys. They didn't all do them together each and every time. But over the span of 5 years, 145 robberies up and down the East Coast, mostly in the Heights.
Whew. Yeah. All right, so Ron, did I bring this picture up? This one. There you go. Another Hell's Angels.
Yeah, I can't remember. I actually forget. That was some other Hell's Angels. In fact, actually, I think I know. I think that was Daly City chapter. But the guy on the right, Dave Tresmonton, was my partner. He ended up retiring as the acting chief of the State Bureau of Narcotics. And now you guys will love this. He's a contract employee at San Mateo County Sheriff's Office doing cold cases, and he's been just knocking them. He's been making some great cases, kind of doing all the legwork, and then they bring in their detectives to kind of help finish it up. But really good copper, and he and I worked a bunch of Angels cases together. The dope in the Mexican cases is much better, but working the Angels was fun.
So I have a question for you, and for the audience, who's listeners. Did you have that many cases that when you see a picture like this, you don't have full recollection? Because I'm thinking if I'm holding a Hell's Angels vest, I'm pretty much got full recollection of the incident.
You know what? I've hit multiple Hell's Angel clubhouses, some of them several times, and a bunch of Hell's Angel pads. So I don't have exact recollection on all of them. But,
so let's get to the cold case stuff that he's doing. Is there a technology advancement on the DNA stuff that's happening?
Absolutely.
Or is it just legwork, or is there something else happening? New advancements in technology, DNA, the genealogy and the work that's happening in that space.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of all. He and I get together and share stories. There might be a beverage involved in that because that always kind of lubricates the discussion. And in fact, we were just at dinner recently in San Francisco. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it is good police work and real legwork. There's no substitute for that. But having the advances in genetic genealogy and the advances in DNA and having the CODIS database a lot bigger than it was when it first, launched. It's it's all made a big difference. And some of these cases are significant. He just had I think last year, a big deal on 2020 about this, these 3 connected cases. They called them the Stanford Killer. They were kind of on the San Francisco Peninsula in that Redwood City, Palo Alto area. And so some really good cases.
Yeah. I'm really excited. So the DNA cases that are being extracted now, and so a lot of unidentified missing and human remains cases are being identified now, which is the jumpstart to an investigation, because, all across this country, I think at one point, about 10 or 12 years ago, we might have had 70 or 75,000 unidentified human remains cases across the country that were documented, because some of these medical examiners are not really medical examiners, they're coroners, which is a complete disaster in terms of putting a case together. And knowing who the victim was is the first step, because if you don't even know who the victim is, where do you even start with? Because a person missing from New York ends up in California, as an example. You don't even know where to start. So now they're getting identified, and then the suspects being identified with additional DNA. So I'm excited about all of that. And then Christian Quinn, a previous guest a couple of weeks ago, who, Ron, very, very well, spent a lot of time with in Fairfax and in BBM. He posted today that there's some fingerprint extractions coming off of fired cartridge cases, which is really exciting too. And so the Jimmy Sheehan weighed in, is like, yeah, but what about DNA? I was like, one step at a time, Jimmy, one step at a time.
Well, they are. So there's,
of course they are.
There's a great technique, and I forget who's pioneering it, but where they do, they wash the cartridge casings. Yep. First they were just swabbing them. Now they're doing somewhere they're doing like a wash. It gives a deeper extraction of the DNA.
Yep.
And then they put it in the DNA, through the DNA process. Some of them are using rapid DNA, which is exciting. The kind of turnaround, quick turnaround. Yeah, I mean, the technology just keeps getting better and better all the time.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that. And I think, just again, for the audience to understand, we're not going to do a deep dive into it, but there was always the oils from your fingerprints on the surface of anything, but those were normally burnt away from the friction and the heat of a discharge fired cartridge case. However, that the oils have acid, and then those actually can burn impressions into the surface of fired cartridge cases. So there was a company in the UK about 10 years ago that Mike Prate, who's going to be a future guest on another case, another RICO case with many, many subjects in the rap industry. So look forward to a January, February case with Jimmy Glynn and Mike Prate from the 7-9 and the FBI on a drug rapper homicide case. But we had a 9/11 homicide where Henryk Ciliak, and we sent the cartridge cases to the UK. Well, Mike did, I didn't, but it was after I left and retired, where they were trying to find the impressions that the acid would burn into the fired cartridge case. So a lot of the whole point is, we're not going to explain all of this technology. It's still not solved, but just the forensics are so exciting right now. And stay tuned, because a lot of really cool stuff is happening with the recent announcement that Christian Quinn released this week, and every day. And Ron, you're in that space and you're working with the rapid DNA companies. This is really an exciting time for forensics and technology. And to think that the Forensic Files TV show was 20 years ago, they should resurface that.
It's interesting in the I think it's got to be about 4 years ago now. What was at the time, that might still be the most deadly wildfire in California. I talked one of the rapid DNA companies, Andy, into bringing their equipment. I said, hey, this rural county, they don't have any money, but they need help. And so Andy stepped up. They brought technicians and instruments in, and I was there, and the remains were there weren't bodies. These were envelopes of dental and bone shard. That was it.
Yep.
They were incinerated.
Yep.
86 people, and using that technology, we got, I think, better than 90%. We got full 20 loci DNA profiles of better than 90%, and we're able to bring closure to those families without not having to wait months because of the backlog, but bringing closure within days, hours sometimes.
Yeah. So, Ron, you just said 20. The standard used to be what, 16 for a confirmed match of more than the human population. So they're doing 20 now.
Now 20 loci, and actually Andy tested 26 loci. I think they even bumped it up a little bit. They're doing incredible work down in the Ukraine on all of the mass graves. And I think the Ukraine National Police are running about 36 or 40 of their instruments right now, kind of almost round the clock.
Awesome. All right. So listen, we are it's 8:40 Eastern time, probably what is that, 5:40 your time. Are you in California?
I am.
Okay, good. So it's early. We're gonna get you to dinner, Ron. So got a couple more photos that you shared. Oh, that's mine. That was that one. Here. So California Narcotics Association, you're on the pedestal speaking at the lectern. So what are you ranting and raving about here?
So this was I did a big rally at the state capitol in Sacramento on opposing drug legalization. There was a ballot initiative to legalize weed. I had all of the state associations. We had us, California police chiefs, California sheriffs, the California peace officers, the labor groups, bunch of politicians. I think we had about 2,500 in the audience at this rally, and we ended up losing the battle anyway at some point. But it was it was a really good effort. We brought up family members who had lost kids due to drug overdoses. Actually, the woman to my right, to the left of the screen in the dark hair, her husband was an LA sheriff's deputy who had just maybe 6 months before that or 4 months before had been killed by a dope dealer, shot and killed by a dope dealer, and Deputy Blair. And so this was, but that was the kind of advocacy, that's the kind of advocacy I'm talking about. That's formal advocacy, but you can do the same thing, on a much smaller scale when you got your neighbors over for a barbecue.
Yeah. Wow.
Guy looks a little bit like Peter King behind her.
It does. It actually does.
Is Bob Hussey. He was our executive director. He had retired from LA sheriffs, about 30 years on LA sheriffs, about 26 of those working narcotics.
Wow.
Yeah, just a great guy. And he's since passed, but did an incredible job for us as our executive director.
Yeah, so Ron, we got a LinkedIn user unidentified, but Ron did some great things for CNOA. Proud to say I'm a lifelong member, so shout out. Thank you for that.
We appreciate that membership. It's a great group.
Yeah, and there was a previous, I'm going to go back to an old comment. Give me a second here if I can find it. Gosh, wow, really far back. We got some good comments tonight. Shucks, I'm not going to waste everybody's time. Oh, here it is. Chris Schaefer. Gents, I have to bounce, but wanted to give a tip of the hat and glass to my former California law enforcement brother. Brooks is one of the good guys. Best. Happy Thanksgiving to all.
That's great.
So, yeah. I'm sure.
Assistant director that went back to being a police chief in California.
Yep, absolutely.
Nice man.
Yeah, great guy. Really
and then the final picture that I have that I brought up. So again, a legacy and a family. So Ron, really appreciate the service not only by Ron Brooks, but the Brooks family. So
that's when I left the state, I went to become the director of the Northern California HIDTA, the high intensity drug trafficking area. But the fiduciary was San Mateo Sheriff. So most HIDTA directors are contractors, but they hired me as a captain. It was great. Financially, it was great for me, but it allowed me to stay in the old neighborhood And so that was my next to my last day. We did a big photo shoot. I had my whole crew there. But that's my son, Brian, in the jacket. He is an assignment editor at the largest news station in the Bay Area. And my daughter, Shannon, was at San Mateo Sheriff's. She's now the deputy security director for the county transit district.
Wow.
And so that was a fun way to go out. We had fire trucks. So you can see the fireboat in the back squirting water.
See it squirting water.
And interestingly, my grandfather, who was an Irish immigrant, was a riveting foreman and helped build that bridge.
Wow.
No shit.
Yep.
Good.
He helped build the Bay Bridge and that bridge. Both. He came from a little place called Brideswell in near Athlone in Roscommon County.
It's pretty awesome. So why don't we do this? Why don't we wrap up your career with transitioning from all those really cool narcos to getting into the NCRIC and the HIDTA. I found out today with some of the social media, like a lot of the New York and East Coast, like they don't know about the regional intelligence centers and the fusion centers and the HIDTAs, especially NYPD. We are so inside of a vacuum, Ron, to be honest with you. And sometimes I understand that. I mean, I understand it all the time. I don't like it. I mean, we at the NYPD didn't even, like, I never even knew what IECP was until my 18th year in the police department. Like, there's such working in a vacuum. And our common friend, Chuck Dowd, who was on the national stage with the broadband and working with Chris Moore, like, he was one of the first people carrying this out into the national, because we did everything ourselves. So for the audience, the NCRIC, Northern California Regional Intelligence Center, HIDTA, all across the country. And then you were the first one, if I got it correct, to bring the HIDTA and the NCRIC and the Regional Intelligence Centers and the Fusion Centers together. So why don't you talk about what that meant, what the lift was, and that we'll wrap up your career with that, and then we'll do some house cleaning to get out of here.
Sure. So there's 33 high-intensity drug trafficking areas around the country. They're designated by the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, the drug czar. I was recruited to take that job, which I did. It was a great gig. And but that's right after 9/11, and we were starting to look at fusion centers. I was chairing. I wasn't the chair yet, but I was on the CICC. We were writing the National Criminal Intelligence Sharing Plan, the Fusion Center Guidelines, baseline capabilities, all of those documents on behalf of. They were all published under the U.S. DOJ seal, signed by the AG. Later, a lot of them that was all before DHS was created. Then we started publishing under joint seal, DHS and DOJ. The state decided, a lot of states had a single fusion center. Our state's big, and so what they decided was we would have 4 fusion centers, 1 for each FBI field division. And so that's what we did. And so we kind of came up with a bright idea. It probably wasn't a good idea because I didn't get paid any more money. I had to do twice the work, no more money. But that it made sense. The HIDTAs, each HIDTA had an intelligence center, analysts, and other intelligence work. And I said, why don't we bring this fusion center, which originally was just counterterrorism, let's bring it all together. And that gives us kind of an all-crime center. We're looking at drugs and gangs and human trafficking and crime gun and the terrorism. And so we did. We managed to get approval from the White House Drug Czar's office to allow us to combine those. And started an MOU. We ran it with a single executive board. So I had 8 federal law enforcement execs and 8 state and local law enforcement execs, sheriffs and chiefs, and a DA that I answered to, my board. And I combined the monies that I was getting from all those grants. I mean, it really combined them. We had to kind of keep them separate, but we could, we only needed one facility. We only needed one big conference room. We only needed so many copy machines. There was a lot of savings. And then I was able to push that savings out to the field. But also, when I had analysts, they were all sitting together. So I had analysts, and they would look at some dope case and they'd say, you know what, this doesn't feel right to me. And they would bring in the terrorism analyst. And so there was a lot of synergy between how they shared information. we started training up a lot of local, not just cops, but firefighters and public health workers and EMS, what to look for, how to spot the signs of a drug lab, but also how to spot the signs of potential terrorism, domestic or international. So we were pumping out about 180,000 or 190,000 student hours of training a year out to the counties. We had from San Luis Obispo to the Oregon border was my AO. And so it was something I'm really proud of. We did a lot of great work. We had incredible support from our chiefs and sheriffs and from our federal partners, the Bureau, ATF. We were co-located in the federal building. And so DEA gave us a half a floor. The Bureau gave us a half a floor. I kept all the non-classified guys up, programs up in the DEA space. Down in the Bureau space, we were in classified space with the SCIF. And so that gave us a chance to work kind of both sides of that. And it was a good footprint. That program is still one of the largest fusion centers in the country today. Very successful still. The director, Mike Senna, is there. Had been one of my deputy directors when I was there. And so I'm proud of everything. Mike has taken the program a lot farther than I did. He's doing an incredible job with it. But all of those fusion centers, that work and the work that our HIDTA directors are doing, the kind of support work. And, it's funny, Tommy, because the New York, New Jersey HIDTA is really just an arm of the NYPD.
Yeah.
If you go up to, they're doing all, but sadly, the average New York cop doesn't know about it. But the guys working Intel, the guys working, major narcotics, they know about it. And a lot of the staff up at their facility, I was just up at their facility with Chauncey Parker and Ken Middleton.
He's been there forever, that guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And so I was just up there. I mean, they're running an incredible program. They're running an incredible crime gun program up there.
Yep.
That should be a model for the country. They do a hot wash every day on like the top 20 gun arrests in New York City. And they bring in probation, parole, detectives, prosecutors from each of the boroughs, and decide if they can connect cases. Is this bad guy, has he been active in multiple boroughs or active across the river in New Jersey? They bring in the state police folks. And so it's a great, that program is really good.
Well, it's funny. I ran into Rodney Harrison, who Tom mentioned earlier last week, and found out that the program I started back in 1997 is actually run out of there as well, the Operation Trigger Lock program.
Yep, exactly.
I got to tell you, I'm disappointed in you that you never heard of the HIDTA. First off, Chauncey Parker has been there since I was in the Bronx homicide 97, maybe earlier than that. And so I knew of HIDTA. But they also were co-located in Chelsea Market back in the day.
Yes.
On the same floor as Ford Modeling Agency.
Yep.
So you went there any chance you could. The fact you didn't know that it was there, I'm very disappointed in you. Very
disappointed in any member who did not know that.
And now they're down at Battery Park. They got a beautiful facility, great views.
Yeah,
it's incredible. But
so Marlon at Fire Detective is online, and he was an intel detective. Ron, I think you'll be very disappointed to hear that Marlon was let go from the NYPD because he failed to take the vaccine as mandated. And I don't know Marlon's full story, but as I understand it, he didn't say I wouldn't take it. He said, I want to have more information. And he didn't meet the deadline and they let him go. And he's a stellar detective, a stellar intel detective. So Marlon, if you're still on, how many NYPD cops out in the rank and file really understand what's going on in intel in the New York, New Jersey HIDTA? So if you want to jump into chat, you can do that and we'll finish that up. But thanks, Marlon, for everything you do and your advocacy for those guys getting back. Because there is some wallowing on, Ron, think about it. We had cops that already had COVID multiple times, and they either had a religious exemption or they just said, I need more information. They said natural immunity. They had doctors saying they had natural immunity. They had police surgeons saying they might have had natural immunity. And there's a good number of New York City police officers and New York City employees that were let go, and they're all fighting for their jobs back or some sort of resolution. But whatever, that's another story for another day, another podcast. Ron Layson let go. That's an understatement. He was terminated with no due process. Not good. So very few, even Intel's own field intelligence cops assigned to precincts did not know about the resources available to HIDTA. So there you go.
That's the shame. Yeah.
Maybe because I did so many cases with SDNY, I knew about it because of the federal nexus. But that blows my mind because they were an invaluable resource,
Right.
Especially if you wanted, Tommy, your product back in the day, you needed to run a bunch of people through Accurant. You called HIDTA. They provided you with all that information. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, we could do a whole thing on technology and information sharing. And so Ron, real quick. So from just yes or no answer, 9/11, 2001, 9/11 report comes out in 2007. Information sharing was are we doing information sharing right today as best as we could?
We're doing information sharing a lot better than we did.
So the answer is
we've got the whole network of fusion centers. We've got a lot of cities that have stood up real-time crime centers. They're sharing through the HIDTAs. Is there room for improvement? Always. But
yeah, of course.
If I look back to where we were before 9/11, we're leaps and bounds ahead of where we were.
Yeah, of course.
Because you study this stuff, after the whole Fast and Furious thing, Tom McGrandon sent me up to Toronto. And I got a chance to work with Canadian law enforcement. And I'm not going to lie, I went up there a little cocky, not verbally. I went up there in my head thinking there's no way the Canadians can hold the candle to the NYPD and the FBI and all these other ATF. And I was shocked at how good the cops are. And they were a lot of old school cops up there in Canada back in those days.
But really good.
Yeah, but the one thing I was taken back by was they were far better than us at gathering, sharing, and disseminating intelligence across the entire country, because they have these criminal intelligence services for each province where they meet and they talk about things, and then there's the CICC Criminal Intelligence Service in Canada, where the people from these provincial offices all get together and they just hash things out. So that's one thing I think that we could learn from them is the better intelligence gathering and sharing. Frankly, on the important stuff where the rubber meets the road.
Yep. It was interesting. I got asked by the. There used to, it's still around, but it's not very active. After 9/11, they created an federal office called the Program Manager for Information Sharing, and it resides it's dual-hatted out of the Director of National Intelligence and the White House National Security Council. But it was not meant to be a federal program. It was meant to help bridge the gap so that we were all federal, state, local, tribal. We were all talking to each other. Shivendra Paul was the director. He sent Tom O'Reilly. Tommy, I don't know if you remember him from New Jersey. Great guy. And so he sent Tom O'Reilly and I under the White House, auspices of the White House, to some meetings at Europol in The Hague to teach them how to do the job. And we got there and realized they were doing the job a lot better than we were doing. We just had to shut up and learn from them.
That's hilarious. I joke that you go into any law enforcement agency in this country and the robbery unit doesn't even share information with the homicide squad.
Often.
So wait, you're telling me one agency is going to share with another agency? I can't even get two units in the same agency to share information.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right, let's go, guys. It's 8:58 Eastern. We're just shy of 2 hours. Ron, what a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I think I can speak for Pete. Really good first hour, give or take 40, 45 minutes of really good policy and things going on in the country with our law enforcement agencies and our brother and sisters who we really care about what's going on. And then great career. And Ron, I'm going to let Pete speak as soon as I finish here. Thank God that people who did the job and were in the streets and in the trenches are the people that are trying because I know you can only do so much. Not that you're not giving your everything, that those kinds of people are trying to get the influence to our legislators and influence policy in this country, because I don't want bureaucrats doing that. I want people who did the job and have gone through the things you went through. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that.
Well, look, I mean, we have a lot of mutual friends. Some people I respect very, very, very deeply. Tom Brandon, Bob Cicada, Danny Ford. I mean, many, many others speak the world of you. I know we had one conversation before this. I hope that, I'm a resource. I'm here in the DC area. If you ever want to talk, reach out, man. I'd be happy to chat with you. And I hope to raise a glass with you during Police Week.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed today's conversation.
I just want to thank you both, first of all, for hosting this podcast, because telling these stories and getting the word out about policing is so critical. I would close up with this for your listeners that are still active cops. You might get frustrated. The policies might get you down, but the work you are doing is maybe some of the most critical work that can be done anywhere. There is, I mentioned it before, but I believe this, there's incredible nobility in our profession. The work is so important. Everybody that's wearing a badge today and everybody that's ever worn a badge ought to be so proud of the work that they do. And I would just ask you to be safe, take care of your partners, but more importantly, take care of your families.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great way to end it, Ron. Thank you for that. There's no more noble job. It's the best. It's the best. And we've all dealt with the victims and we've all put the bad guys in jail, and man, it's just so good. But it does take a piece out of you. And like Pete said, you got to come back whole. You're never going to come back whole, but if you have a good support system in the family and they understand what they've signed up for. My son just recently got married to a wonderful girl, and I had a conversation with her before they got married. Do you understand what you're getting into? And I said, and I really believe that you and your family are supportive of law enforcement, but are you really in it? And she said, I'm in it. I get it. So you cannot do it alone.
Nope.
So you need the family and the support, and you're going to be broken, and they shouldn't try to fix you. They should just try to understand it and let you go through it and help you get the help you need. So anyway, all right. So we got some house cleaning. Ron, it's going to take about 5 or 10 minutes to clean up and do all of this stuff. So stay on, because Pete and I will just do a hot wash. We'll do a hot wash after, because you brought that up. We do 3 up and 3 down, but the Navy folks do hot washes, right? I don't know if you got that from the Navy or.
Yep.
Dale Ferranto, a mutual friend of ours from Cal DOJ, used to do hot washes. Washes. So rest in peace, Dale Ferranto, former Cal DOJ chief. Let me see if there's any more comments. As an FIO, fire detective Marlon, back when we called cops assigned to the intel sergeant that a detective in the FIA surveillance team leads. I'm not fully getting that. He understands what he's talking about. Ron, an old timer, told me the same. It's a noble profession. Thank you for that. Terry Murnane, great homicide detective from Brooklyn North. Great show, guys. Everyone have a nice Thanksgiving. Stay well, stay safe. 92 Charlie, great show. Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving all. Okay, so we have Ron Layson and Rob Lukash, the executive perspective, 2 NYPD executives. Wednesday show, Chaos at the Synagogue. Apparently on episode 40, Ron and Rob delve into a recent protest at the Park East Synagogue, where participants were permitted to protest and counter-protest directly in front of the house of worship. Will discuss the planning failures of the Midtown North Precinct Commander, which led to the police commissioner issuing a public apology to the congregation. Additionally, they will discuss the harsh criticism received by the first deputy mayor, Randy Mastro, as well as the response of Mayor-elect Mondami. Let me just tell you, I want to make a comment on this. I live now in Charlottesville, Virginia. For those of you who don't know where Charlottesville, Virginia is, it's Central Virginia, the university. Ron, you talked about speaking and lecturing with the University of Virginia public policy, public safety team here. we had a demonstration of Unite the Right a few years back, and it was a public relations failure, and it was a tactical failure because they allowed the protesters and the counter protesters, who are supposed to only have, and the only obligation, the only right they have is sight and sound to each other and to who they're protesting, they allowed them to get too close. And things got out of hand, and a woman died, and a riot ensued, and 2 Virginia State Police troopers died in a helicopter crash, and it was a complete disaster. So if there's anybody out there listening who are police executives somewhere in the country, know how to handle protests and counter protests, because those things can go sideways really, really fast, and people will get hurt. We support the First Amendment, right to free speech. You can say whatever you want. We'll put you in a place. You can speak. You have sight and sound. Counter protesters, you will have a place to speak and you will have sight and sound, but you will not intrude on the public and you will not interfere with each other in a physical way. That is just not acceptable. So we had that here. So Ron and Rob are going to talk about those failures and how those protesters and counter protesters should never have gotten as close to the public and as close to each other as they should have, as they did, I should say. Okay, so with that, that's tomorrow night. Rob and Ron are at 5:05 tomorrow night. The Sal Greco show every Tuesday and Thursday, 1:05 p.m. Sal is off on Thursday for Thanksgiving. He's not going to go, but you can go next week. And then we have the 10-4 Tavern here. You can follow us on YouTube, X, Instagram, Facebook, and then Pete and I are most prominent on LinkedIn. That's where you'll find us most active. You can communicate with us for sure there. Let me see what else I got. That's it. So Pete, I know you had your book. Sorry, I think I lost it. But we've produced it.
Path, it's on sale. The Path. It's before Black Friday. I wanted to beat him to the punch. It was already on sale on Amazon. But that's true story.
Yep. So a couple of last comments. Marlon, a lack of adequate manpower is very much a budget problem that's going on in the NYPD and probably all across the country. So with that, we're going to wrap it up, everybody. Really appreciate the audience. We are at 428, Ron, so exceeded the 400 that we expected, a little short of the 450 I estimated, but I'm going to call it a holiday week that I think people are disconnected and out, so I think we would have gotten it. Here you go, everybody. Finest Unfiltered. Man, Marlon is so good. That's Marlon doing that, even though
signed copies are available at that website right there. Signed copies.
Yeah. So get Pete's book, Fast and The Deadly Path, the Fast and Furious story, and Pete's whistleblowing. Great show, guys. We got great show. Appreciate it. Be safe, everybody. Thanks for joining us, Ron. Smash the likes on the way out. Please subscribe. Pete, I don't know if you know this, when we started the Finest Unfiltered, there were about 30,000 subscribers. We're at 54,000 subscribers in about a half a year. So I hope we have a significant contribution to the Finest Unfiltered team for the subscribers. Ron, what a great career. Thank you. Keep going. Don't stop. We need you. Law enforcement in this country needs you to keep advocating the way you have been doing. I know it's a big strain on your family, not only when you were doing law enforcement in the country, but flying back and forth from California to DC, back and forth, visiting all the cities and states in the country. What a service to the country. You are a blessing to law enforcement. Thank you.
Thanks, Tommy. I appreciate that.
Okay, with that, we're out, everybody. Ron, Pete, stay on for a hot wash after the show.